Welcome back, Myron here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Material UI. So today we're just going to take a look at the typography component, and we're just going to isolate it to typography. We're not going to talk about forms or any of the layout stuff. We're just going to kind of put typography in place so it's nice and consistent. And what I mean by put typography in place is there's actually a component in Material UI that'll handle typography so that it's nice and consistent for us. This is the typography component. Now if we scroll down, we can see the different styling ways that it's handled. So that gives us lots of options to be able to vary it throughout our application, but still remain consistent across the entire thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the typography component, and we can see that it's just typography. Right? So we're going to import that into all of our pages, and then we're going to use it consistently. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into here, and then we're going to repeat kind of what we're doing here across the other pages because it'll look somewhat consistent. Now we're going to start with the heading, and then I'm going to explain what I'm doing across these different little areas here with the listed out creatures. Then when we get to details, we're going to try and resemble that same setup when we go in and we handle these bits of text here. Now we're going to do the typography on this, but we're going to handle these a little bit different because these are actually going to be something else a little bit later on. And then on the edit, we're not really going to do too much on the edit here. We'll add typography here, here, and in the heading, but we're not going to do it across the forms because they're going to get handled by form components when we get there later. So let's go ahead and start back at our list and see what this looks like. So here on the home page, you'll notice we've got the heading here. Now we want to make this typography, so I'm going to import the material component. For right now, I'm going to have them side by side because I want to show you how this is going to be a little bit different. So the typography component gives us, again, more props that we can pass to it to do settings. One of which looks familiar, which is our variant. Our variant tells us how do we visually want that treated. And we can pass things in like H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, subtitle 1, subtitle 2, body 1, etc. So from there, we've got our variant, so that's going to be our visual. But it's got this other attribute or prop that we can pass to it called component. What component is it tells us what kind of element do we want it to display as. So although we could give it the variant H1 look, it could actually be an H2. This is very important when we start getting into things like accessibility, readability on our page. We want to make sure that our document outline is correct. So although we give it an H1 look, we might give it an H2 element. So the element that we want to use is going to be consistent with the element we used before. We want an H2. So I'm going to say components is the H2. Now again, I'm going to multi-line this because we're going to add a couple of attributes here. And then we want a variant. We're going to start with the H1 and then we're going to figure out what we like. And the H1's rather large. Right? This seems a little overbearing for what we're looking for. So let's hop down a couple rungs, because if we just went to H2, it'd be a little bit smaller, but probably not small enough. So let's try our H3. H3 is not bad. We could actually get by with an H3, but let's check the H4 and see if H3 or H4 is going to be better for us. In this particular case, I kind of like the H4 a little bit better, so let's go with our H4. We'll delete the old one, and we'll allow the H4 to be the variant or the style sizing that we're using. Now, the other heading had built into it some margin on the top and bottom. This one, however, does not. Typography does not. Most styling libraries strip out what is the HTML, CSS base styles. So H1s, H2s usually have a top and bottom margin when you just put them in without any styling. But for most styling libraries, they strip that or they reset those styles, which is exactly what's happening here. So if we want to add to this, we can use this attribute, the gutter bottom. This will add spacing to the bottom for us. So let's go ahead and try adding that attribute. Now we've got a little bit of spacing here, so that's looking a little bit nicer. We could potentially adjust it, do we want more, do we want less, but let's just leave it there while we go ahead and address the other ones, and then see if we need to bring it in anymore. So now let's take a look at these headings on the item. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the list item. And we're going to bring in typography. I'm going to try and match the component that we were using here. So it's an H4. And then the content was the creature name. And now we can remove this one. Now we have a custom style here, but I don't want the custom style because I want to keep it consistent with Material UI, and then we'll add some flair as we need it. Now we definitely don't want this to be the same size as the heading that is our page heading here. So I want something that's going to be smaller than that. And we used, if we come back to home page, we used the H4. So I want to come down to maybe an H6. Which, that's not bad at all. Right? This is pretty nice. Then we want to handle the label here for the type and the physical description. For the variant, I'm going to use body 1. This is their base body text styling. So this is what their general text should look like. And then I've got a strong tag, which I'm going to keep around the type for now, and then we're going to look and see if there's something we can add to make it a little bit more appropriate for material. And then remove the p tag from here, save, and come back over. Alright, so the type is here, the size has been matched. Now, you'll notice that spacing has been reduced again, right? Because it is resetting spacing. So I'm going to go ahead and add the gutter bottom on this one as well. There we go. Gave us a little space. And we might say we want that on here as well, because right now it's just the line height that's actually adding the space. So rather than relying on the line height, let's go ahead and add in the gutter bottom. Yeah, that looks a lot cleaner. So now let's clean this up down here. Our component again will be a p tag. Now, in the upper one, we used a p tag, but that's maybe not semantically the best one. This might be better as a div. So we've got a p tag on this one, and we want the variant to also be body1, but we probably don't need the gutter on the bottom. Now it's taken out what was our italicized and everything, so if we wanted to add that back in, we might add something here. But we're probably going to do something completely different with here, so all we're trying to do is make the text consistent for now, and we've got the body1 being used. We could take a look at body2 and see if that's what we want. Body2 is a little bit smaller, so let's try adding body2 in and see what we've got. So body2 made it a little bit smaller. Not so bad. So we'll keep it at body2, and then we'll move on from there. Now we've got this card action here, and we've got the div wrapping with this card body, but we don't actually need these things anymore. We're going to need something else here when we go to replace it. But we're not going to worry about that just yet, because all we want to tackle is just all of the typography getting changed out. So what I'm going to do is actually take a look at, do we want this as the strong tag, or is there a bold setting that we could use on typography? So I'm going to scroll down and maybe see if there's a visual representation of bold. There's not. So if we don't see a visual representation for what we want to try, we click on the API documentation at the bottom, and it takes us to show us all the props available. I've got alignment, I've got children nodes, I've got classes, color, component, right? So we could potentially change color as well. Inherit, primary, secondary, text primary, text secondary, error, right? Lots of helpful things. And then display, gutter bottom as we've seen, no wrap, paragraph, variant, and again, variant is just, these are all of the options for the different stylings. So let's see if there's one. We've got captions, we've got body, we've got subtitles. Nothing here that tells me like it's going to be bold, right? And then variant mapping. So there's nothing there telling us it's going to be bold. So I'm going to keep the strong tag in place, and then we'll play around with it later on if we want. So we've got all of the typography over here. So now here, everything's consistent, but we want to maintain consistency across the rest of our pages. So let's go through and do the same thing on these pages that we just did on the home page. We'll go ahead and commit our changes first. And now we'll go ahead and update the details page. I'm just going to go through and update these, and then if there's something that we should be highlighting, I'll go ahead and do that for you, but mostly it's going to look a lot like what we've just done over on the home page, because we're using all of those same things, typography and then different variants in typography. So let's go ahead and just knock it out. And now with that, we've got all of our stuff consistently using typography, so that if we need to do adjustments to typography, we can do it across the board. Now you'll notice that there is one area where I did not use typography, and that's on these items here, because we're going to talk about these items and what we want to do for them down here. There's going to be a different, little bit more special treatment for these things down here. So with that, thank you for joining in on typography, and don't forget to always check the documentation to make sure you understand how the item's being used, so that when you're using your component on the page, you're using it appropriately. Thank you.